I'm going to be telling you about two books that I've read recently. They're kind of smaller books, and you're going to find both of them very interesting. Welcome to Mrs. Peach Thrifty Living. I'm glad you're here. And this is hashtag Thursday Booktubes. This is hosted by my friend Patty at Life with Patty and Daphne at My Mountain Home. You can go and see what they've posted this week. They've come up with some really good books that you might find interesting. It doesn't just have to be a novel. I've showed different kinds of books, and Patty has showed different ones. And it's always interesting. You don't know what you're going to see, so stay tuned. Like I say, I have two. And actually, it's in one book. I got this at the thrift store. I showed you the outside of it somewhere in one of my videos. And this is called the Bartered Bride Collection. First off, when I first read it, I read Battered. No, it's not battered, it's bartered. The first story was called, I can't even hardly pronounce that word. Let me show you. That Joey D. Vivry, something like that. This was a novel, and it was in Louisiana in 1819. This was about a young girl. She was just turning 18. Her name was Josie. And I'm going to simplify their names because they somehow talk really a little harder. So she was turning 18, and she had been orphaned and been taken in by this family, and they had raised her as their own. And when you became 18, you're supposed to get married. Well, they decided, she was always friends with one of the sons that was a little younger. He was kind of carefree, and they got along good, and he always made her laugh. Well, then there was the other son that was a little older. His name was Edward, and he had went away from the family tradition and went to war and came back injured. He still could make it, but he had a big scar on his face, and he wasn't as attractive, but he was a hard worker. And the parents had decided that when she turned 18, she would marry Edward. Well, she really didn't want to marry Edward because she liked the other young man better, but somehow in history, you marry who your parents say to marry. And that was her parents, basically, not in blood, but she was going to obey him. She did marry him. He fixed up the old house. He was very kind to her. And before it was all said and done, they had fell in love. And she knew that this was the one. It came slow. There was a lot of ups and downs. She didn't know how to cook very well. She had always did other things, but he was very patient with her, and she went and learned from Mama. And she eventually became a good housekeeper and cook and took care of their new little home, and it was a good story. My second story is a little fresher in my mind because I just finished it last night. This one was called Button String Bride. And I don't know, I looked this up, and I guess there was a tradition of young girls. And this was back in, let's see if it shows a date. This was in the old days too. I'm not sure it shows. This was in the wagon train days. This young girl, her family was rich in all accounts. She was probably 17, 18 at that time. They joined the party going to Oregon. Well, in the process, and Dad, he was very green at knowing, he was like a businessman, but he bought the best of everything to go on this, to the wagon train. They outfitted them with things that they would not even dream of taking on the covered wagon. and they'd taken money and taken medicines and all kinds of things that the pharmacist had written in the book of different medicines and what they're for and how much to use. They came in handy along the trail. Well, it wasn't too long, and her mom and dad both died, and there she was with her wagon and without her parents, and she couldn't drive the wagon so much. Well, in comes the young man. This girl's name was Miss Davis. There was a young man on the train. He had lost his wife. She died on the trail. And he had two young children, a little girl, I don't know, 2 or 3, and a little boy that was 7 or 8, something like that. And he was doing his best to do the wagon train. And on the line, she ended up taking care of this little boy and girl, and she ended up giving her wagon to somebody else that needed it. And she had all this money, quote unquote, compared to most everybody else, but she was so generous. She was giving animals away and giving her property away because she couldn't keep it herself. These buttons. The tradition was if you collected all these buttons, when you got to the 1,000th button on your string, then it was time to get married. She had helped the young boy, Ethan's son, with his math by counting buttons, and he was getting really good at it. And she was kind of getting interested in him, and he was her. But the money, he knew she was rich, and he was as poor as could be. And he just didn't feel like he could marry somebody that was so much richer than him, even if it was on a wagon train. She had bought things whenever they got to a place where she could buy extra. She bought all kinds of things, and she gave it away to the people that needed it, because hardly any of them had the resources that she had. Fast forward to her taking care of the children and being kind of basically the nanny, and he slept under the wagon in a bedroll, and she slept with the children, and eventually the little girl got sick and nursed her back to health, and they ended up getting married. And it was a beautiful story because he kept thinking that he couldn't marry her because of her money. You know, this one made me think of things. I've read a lot of wagon train stories in my day. That's one of my things. And I've always watched Wagon Train on TV. But this one made me think of things I did not ever think of, as far as wagon trains and all them having to worry about the dust and the dirt. And when they would get to a place where they had to do the washing, their animals drinking the water, they had a strict rule of where they could drink their water, where the animals could, and where they could take their baths, all those kind of things. When they did have water, sometimes they was out of water, and it just put it in so much more perspective than I ever really thought of. So if you ever see this book, you get more than one story. There's 9 stories in here, I think I read, and I just read 2. If you haven't read lately, it's a good thing to do. And I just pray that God will bless you today. Thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow will be Friday hauls, and I do have some hauls I will be showing you. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow. Don't forget, Jesus loves you. He loves you every day of your life. And we'll be praying, you guys, all for this. And everyone, please pray for this storm that is going on. The one that was in Florida already, Helene, that was so devastating. And now this one right on its trail behind it. My daughter and son-in-law and their families are expecting it. He's been posting videos of their updates of what all they're doing and getting prepared and making sure they have plenty of everything and all that. just pray for everyone involved in this. The workers, everyone that has a part in it, and pray God just stops the storm, lets it dissipate in the sky where it doesn't hurt anybody. I don't know exactly how to say that, but okay, I'm rambling. Just pray. See you tomorrow. God bless you.